Welcome, everybody. You've built a map.
We've been through 3 seasons of understanding mental health in the modern world.
Season 4 is building on the understanding.
This season, we're going to go domain by domain: work, home, digital, relationships, identity, and take a look at what it actually means to design the spaces that you're occupying.
Not optimize it, not discipline your way through it.
Create it,
Either you're designing your field.
or something else is.
Welcome to Roaming Mind Season 4.
This is a concept that I have been aware of for a while, but that I don't think I ever really associated it with identity. And partially it's because of movies that I watched growing up. It's also really interesting because at least when I was growing up, nobody was sitting there telling me, "Don't worry, your identity is going to shift." That's not what they told me. The only thing that people ever told me was life is going to look different when you get older. And you're like, "Fuck you, old man. Who do you know? Come on, dude." I mean, entire movies have been made around this concept,
Mm-hmm.
but at no point in time did any of them mention identity shifts. They're just like, "Oh, they're not the same people as they once were."
Yeah. You get to the core, people didn't necessarily have the word or necessarily don't even think of it as an identity shift because identity is such a hefty word
It,
that
it
sometimes
yeah,
it's just like they're like, oh, people change. They've changed over
right,
time.
right. It
Because
is
that's more palatable in a way than
right.
being like your identity is gonna change. Because I mean, what does that mean? As if the good, the bad.
Uh-huh. Exactly. What does that mean? I think that's the best way to put that. We've been talking about it for a few weeks, and even I can tell you that it's a struggle to define exactly what it is that to put that into words other than identity. And I mean, we can talk about it. I guess the simplest way is how we see ourselves and how we see that change, right? But we don't think, no, I don't like that. I'm sorry. That's wrong. How we engage with ourselves.
Yeah. And I was gonna say that also
Sorry.
because, but I was gonna say what is encompassed in a identity is different from person to person. There might be components that
Mhm.
are shared through, but
Yeah.
however you choose to, this is my identity, this is what
Mhm.
is different from the next person. So sometimes
Mhm.
saying that your identity is going to change, because sometimes there are certain physical qualities, characteristic
Mhm.
that certain things about people that is included in their identity. So people are like, well, that's not going to change. What are you talking about? If you were to say your identity is going to change.
Mhm. I also think it gets a bad rep because it is a very polarizing term, and I not that's not a knock on it's just when people hear the term identity, we tend to associate that with some concepts that are very polarizing in America. That's just gonna kind of be how it is. But that doesn't change the fact that these things are all identity related. I know, here's what the best way that I can kind of sum up the very abstract things that we are kind of getting at. Um, when I was in high school, I had a very specific identity. It was not, I'm not telling you it was a good one. I'm not telling you whatever. What I can tell you is that today it is a far cry from what it used to be. If one's over here, the other's completely over here. Not to say that that is a bad thing. However, I played an active role in shaping who that person became over time.
Hmm.
Not There are points in time where we just kind of wake up one day and are like, "Huh, man, I've really changed a lot." And sometimes that's okay. Sometimes that's warranted. Sometimes it's not. That maybe not warranted isn't the right word. Sometimes it's accepted and sometimes it isn't, because sometimes we wake up and we look at ourselves and we're like, what the fuck am I doing? I don't like this person. And I can tell you, I've been on both sides of the coin. I have woken up at certain points of time and been like, ooh, that's ugly. But at the same time, I've also woken up and been like, all right, I can do this. This is a person that I am okay becoming. And these things, the reason why I say I played an active role in it is just because I was painfully aware of everything that I was doing and everything that I was inputting to be able to shape who it is that I was becoming. Because we are continuously shaped by the environments that we put ourselves in, the relationships with the people around us, the patterns of attention that we have accumulated, the
Yeah.
attractors that exist inside of our environment that we pay attention to, that we are naturally going to come to. Uh, all of these things, and also the things that we do.
Mhm.
The things that we do shape
Or
who
your
it is that
identity.
we
Yeah.
end up becoming. And okay, so to some extent, some of us choose these things. We go and we set out and we say, all right, this is what I'm going to choose. I want to do this, 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 and this. Not understanding fully that those actions have, I, I don't want to say consequences because it's not a consequence. It's, I guess, a
Exactly.
consequence has
It's
a
an
negative
effect.
implication.
It
I'm
is an
sorry.
effect. It's an effect. It's not an as an effect.
It's Yeah, it's just a byproduct of what happens. And we either pay attention to those byproducts on a very granular level as they're happening, or if you're like most people, we don't pay attention to those granular I don't always pay attention to the really nitty-gritty details that whatever are happening. Um, I just keep taking action and then I pay attention overall to what is going on. But that doesn't mean that just because I pay attention, I can't get slapped in the face and be like, "Oh, dang, man, that is that is not it.
Yeah.
That is not me." And this can be attributed to things like midlife crisis, things like that, where you just wake up one day and you're like, this isn't what I wanted to do. I I wanted to become X person, but in order to become X person, I had to do Y, Z, B, and D, and I got in the realm and vicinity of here. It's not that I determined the identity that I wanted to have, it's that I determined the career that I wanted to have, the amount of money, the family lifestyle, all of those things were decided, but we didn't necessarily know the identity that has to come with those things. I talk with kids kind of regularly. They're like, "Well, I just wanna make a whole lot of money." And you're like, "Okay, well, how do you wanna do that?" "Well, I don't know." "Oh, well, what kind of person do you have to be in order to do that?" I don't know." And that's not an uncommon situation. If you had asked me the same question in high school, I'd have looked at you like you had 4 heads and been like, "I don't know. Who knows? What does it matter? Do I really have to know that?" Um, it is it is natural to feel misaligned with what it is that you're looking for
Yeah.
or who it is you're becoming if you are taking actions towards mm, mm, I don't want to say materialistic, but I'm going to say tangible. Tangible, because materialistic has that negative implication again, and that's not what I'm getting at. But again, tangible, concrete things. I want to become a doctor. That's okay. There's nothing wrong with becoming a doctor, but you have to become a certain person in order to become a doctor. I you tend to be a little bit more withdrawn when it comes to human interactions. Why? Because to an extent you have to be. You have to be able to walk in and say, "Hey, ma'am, you are dying." Without any emotion, without anything. You have 3 months to live. What? And then sit there and watch them break down before your very eyes. And again, it's a different kind of robotic than a
No, yeah,
software.
no, you're making a good it is even as much as your insides break, there
Mhm.
has to be a level of like professionalism and cool because you essentially as a doctor, you can
Mhm.
also be breaking down in front of the patient while you're telling them this news. So there is a level of I don't necessarily like the word detachment that has to come. I think more
Mhm.
of I think the word is perspective that has to come with, being in the field that you have to have in order to have these difficult interactions with people. And sometimes you are, and sometimes you can be joyful if the patient is in recovery. There's a time where you can maybe show a little bit more of the true emotion that you're feeling. So it is, and because detachment, because you also have to have the right emotion. You also can't be robotic and be like, you're dying and then not have any care or anything because you are
Right.
delivering heart wrenching and life changing news to not only the patient, but their whole entire family. And there
Family.
is a
Yeah, right.
whole lot of responsibility that comes with it. Because
Mhm.
I think,
And
I don't know if you mentioned this, but work does something to your identity. You have to make choices and that choices around your work that you necessarily have that can have lingering effect on you as a person because going back to the example of a doctor, you go in that room, you say there's things, you have to have a certain composure and a certain demeanor, but it doesn't mean that it does not affecting you because you can literally the moment you leave the room with that patient, if you can feel a certain heaviness. I've had those interactions with
Mhm.
mentors before where they'll go in, they're professional and they care, but they also can't let the emotion override the situation. So, because you also have to start making plans with the patient and telling them what to do. But the
Mhm.
moment they leave, they're like, oh God, that was awful. And you can just see the effects on them, right, you have to be back to the next patient, and you
Mhm.
have to maybe deliver a really good news to that patient, be like, "Oh, everything's going well," all these different things. So you have to start switching, which can have a lasting impact on you as a person that you then take into all these other environment as well.
And it kind of perfectly segues to our next kind of idea and topic. Maybe not that. It highlights kind of where we've been. That is a very specific way of being. That ability to switch contexts dramatically. Um, that idea of this, maybe we can call it loving detachment. There's some level of accepting, there's some level of caring, but at the same time, I can't exhibit anything. That sort of behavior becomes a piece of our identity outside of work, whether we like it or not. And the past few episodes, those are the things that we have been talking about: work identity, digital identity, these kinds of things. They pull out of those spaces and become a part of our identity as a whole. You can think about it like a big, I'm trying to think of how what analogy. I think the best one is probably like it's almost like a house, right?
Yeah,
They're like rooms of a house. In one room you have your work identity, in one room you have your digital identity, in one room you have your home identity, you have relational identities, all of these sorts of things, and they all exist inside of your mental house that formulates your overall identity. You
that's it.
can pick and choose from each and every single one, but that's not always what happens. We don't always pick and choose from each one and try to figure out exactly how it is we want that identity to look. In the long term, we just kind of mush them all together and they blend in.
I
And
can
and
give a
that's
personal anecdote because as a person who's studying, trying to go to medical school, that compartmentalization of being able to be like, okay, I am with the patient. It's really beneficial when with patient on the patient, but patient interaction. But I've also seen an effect where it's bled into my personal life as well. Because
Mhm.
a week or two ago, something happened. I'm not going to go into details in this now on here, but it happened to two people and I was one of them. The other person is still having a hard time with it. And I just kind of went, okay, this happened. We're going to move on. And it's funny because yesterday the person texted me and was like, why do you not seem more affected by this? And I was like, oh, it happened. I made notice of it and I have to move on. I can't necessarily sit and dwell and do all these stuff. And the person was like, well, that's interesting. And I was having a hard time understanding why they were still struggling with something that happened a week ago. I was like, that
Right.
seems very weird.
Yeah. No, and I think that this is that also kind of it just moves the conversation along just ever so perfectly. We have okay, so we have our little house of identity, and it is identity kind of acts. Mm, let me rephrase this. Unconscious identity, the when we don't choose, when we're not actively engaged with it, acts more as a residue. It acts as something that kind of just drips and filters into, well, I shouldn't say filter because there really isn't. There is a never mind. Well, I'll leave it. Drips and filters into other areas of our life in order to produce our identity as a whole. That doesn't mean that it has to strictly operate as residue. You can pick and pull from all of these other places because they are still in your toolbox. This is something that actors do incredibly well. They pick and choose from the toolbox. They say, okay, what does this situation require of me? It requires diligence. It requires and I'm trying to think of the best way that I want to say this, and I think the best way is not to go into specifics because I will fail at the specifics, but they pick action verbs, whatever that case may be, and they're like, this is what that situation requires. I know from here, I've got these pieces of identity here and this piece of identity here, and we're going to kind of amalgamate them all together in order to go and act out those action verbs. It's not, I want to make sure that this is very clear. Identity has absolutely, in the sense that we are talking about it, yes, it is related, but for our purpose and understanding this conversation, has nothing to do with self-actualization.
No.
Well, we kind of mentioned that a little bit last week, so I wanted to make that distinction clear. Yes, self-actualization is 100% a piece of identity. It is directly a part of it. However, just because we are acting in specific ways or behaving in specific manners or acting out certain identities, I keep coming back to that word acting, but I really don't love that.
No,
It is what it
but I
is.
think that's good because I actually want to talk about that. Because remember a couple months ago when you're reading The Method by Savonozowski?
Mhm.
Because as you were speaking, it made me think of how a lot of actors they say once they're done with, especially actors that use method, they say once they're done with a character, there is a little bit of the piece of the character that stays with them because in order to fully convey a lot of actors in order for or to truly convey the emotions, they stay in character, they inhabit the characters for it to feel
Yep.
real to the audience, so, and behind
Yep.
the camera. But there is one day where they're gonna go, cut, that's it, last shot. And then you have to then remove the character and then go back to your regular life. And a lot of time it takes them a long time for the character
Mhm.
to really move away from that, because once when you're inhabiting this other person and you're acting it out, it's really hard to remove yourself from certain situation. It almost can become a comfort zone thing. Going back to my example earlier, maybe being in that compartmentalization where I'm like, okay, this thing happened, I have to do it, and then once I do it, I'm moving on. It maybe has become a comfort zone for me. That now that in my personal life, when certain things happen, I'm just easily able to go, okay, that happened. Now I got to move on because it's my comfort zone. I have the residue of those things of that action has bled into other parts of my
Mhm.
identity as well.
So there was actually, do you watch Euphoria? Okay. So there was an incredible example of exactly what you are just talking about that I think highlights that residue. mentality absolutely perfectly from the season that just aired. There's a scene, and I don't know everybody's names because I'm not that invested in it. I kind of turn it on when I'm cooking and shit like that. Um, whoever Sydney Sweeney plays, I forget the character name. It doesn't matter. They're they go to read for a part, or they have the part. Details are irrelevant in that respect, but they're in a scene. It's her and one guy, and um they're sitting there. She's going through the script, and in a split second of a moment, a piece of that, and you can call it PTSD, but it's probably not right. But the sensory information that was coming in at that moment in that scene took back to a time. So it pulled that attentional hierarchy that we were talking about forward, and it pulled that straight to the forefront. And she literally had this massive emotional meltdown that worked in the context of the scene because that identity was there. No matter what, knew how to play that, knew how to behave in that specific manner because that identity had been enacted in other places. So it just kind of seeped on in. Then that was an example from personal life a little bit ago, bleeding into now work life that is coming in. And it is
Very good. We'll get off the actor topic because I was recently watching a podcast with Viola Davis, and she was saying
Mhm,
something similar. And she said, in order for her to truly inhabit the characters, she
mhm,
must pull from details of her real life in order to
mhm.
really get the emotion out there.
Right.
She's like, okay, maybe this character is going through this thing. She
Mhm,
hasn't gone through the exact thing, but she's like, what in my life have I gone through that is close enough? And she starts pulling from that emotion and that experience there and then builds it up to relate it
mhm.
to the character. But,
Right.
that
And
is our
so
acting 101 class. Bye.
yeah, no, but and here's what I'm gonna this is the only thing that's gonna separate what you just said from what I was talking about is the fact that this was a completely organic moment. It wasn't from, "Oh, let me pull from this." It was literally just something that happened because of the structure of the field that was surrounding them.
Yes,
And
that's it.
those moments typically tend to be the most incredible in acting, but these are the actual mechanisms that end up making that possible because of our identities, because of the things that we go through, because of our interactions with the field that exists around all of us and the way that our brain filters attention and things like that. This is what makes those moments possible. And I know I mean, all of this is relevant. Yeah, I don't think any of it is irrelevant. This is one of the reasons why I went personally and started studying reading acting to begin with. I don't want to be an actor. However, understanding how they shift from one identity to the next, to the next, to the next is super important for what it is that I've been looking at. And again, I was reading about it 4 months ago, but now we're actually using it within context and getting to be able to understand all of that. It is super interesting that we don't pay more attention to identity unless
Mm.
you are members of specific communities. Those tend to be the only people that really get I don't want to say hung up because that
Uh,
implies negative, but that have that more vigilant focus. I think that's a better way on identity because that is something that has plagued them throughout their existence. And that is I'm not saying that they're wrong for that. That's just been their experience with the fields that they have been placed in.
yes.
So rather than hitting that performance, which is such a big deal for us, we, or at least that specific group doesn't perform, they just embrace that identity. And then they sit there and they say, well, this is us. This is how I am. What are you going to, Lady Gaga's Born This Way is a perfect example of that is an identity level decision that is being embraced as opposed to well, let me perform a different way. And we
Yeah.
see that again, that is something that is very specific to LGBTQ communities because they are hyper aware of the fact that it is either perform or I am this way. We don't have that same hyper vigilance existing outside of that community because it's not at the forefront of our attention span. It's not a matter of, oh, I'm different than everybody else. So why is that? If you're not different than anybody else, what are you going to question that for? You're just going to go along with what people are doing because we're social creatures. Who wants to be ostracized for no reason if they don't have to be? But if you don't have that option because that's not the case, well, then it's kind of what you have to do. Like that's okay, is what I'm saying. It's not
Yeah.
a these are just the observations behind all of it. And we we constantly uh, perform. We constantly put
Oh
on
yeah.
performances, and that is okay. It's just another side of the coin. But that's one thing that makes identity really hard in that moment is that we have to go and perform.
I mean,
Make sense?
life is a performance. It just matter we play
It
different.
doesn't have to be. The system
I
is
mean,
set up in such a way that we make it a performance.
even I think even if you're being truly authentic, there is a certain level of performance that comes with being a person.
I No, it doesn't have to, is what I'm saying.
I don't
Yes,
know.
you're
I
right.
agree with you. It doesn't have to. It will be
Cool.
great. Yeah.
Yeah, my
The
only point
way that
is
our systems is set up, I don't
right.
want to say system is set up, but by the way of
Designed.
life, designed,
Yeah,
it's that there
yeah,
is a certain level of performance that comes with anything.
right.
If you're at work and you're not feeling great, but your boss is watching you, you might stand up a little straighter, and then so, but you might not think of it as necessarily performing. You're just like but there is a level of that we may not always associate with as a performance that makes life a performance.
One of the biggest problems with that is competition, because that's why we perform, is it not? We perform because of competition. Now, a part of that is biological in nature, and I'm well aware of that. That a thing. I'm not trying to um, take that away from anybody, but I do wholeheartedly, and I did think a lot about this for this week for some God only knows reason. If we just viewed everybody as human beings trying to make it through a really, really complicated life, performance just kind of goes out the window because it stops being about, oh, well, can I beat you or not? It starts becoming about, oh, well, they're just trying to survive like I am. It, it's mostly irrelevant. We don't have to go off on that tangent, but I didn't even expect to go down this deep into performance in that regard. So that's one piece. The other piece is that for most of us, identity happens gradually.
Hmm.
If you think back to our LGBTQ community example, that shift doesn't happen gradually. That shit hits them in the face like a fucking semi truck. You're like, oh, snap. I am not like the rest of you. I do
That's
not subscribe to heteronormative values. This is not the way, right? So they're forced to confront it long before other people. Again, if we're thinking about a transition from a younger age to career oriented, you take certain steps along the way to get to that career. That's just a
Mhm.
matter of what we have to do. Each and every step creates these minor little shifts in personality and minor little shifts here and over here and over here that produce gradual shifts over time, which is where that more temporal aspect of things comes into our framework that we don't realize until the shift has become gradual enough to say, holy shit, I'm not the person I used to be. That's crazy. And sometimes it doesn't even happen. Do you know how many people still listen to the same music that they
Yeah.
listened to in high school on repeat?
I'll
On repeat.
love this guy. He's my friend, but man has probably, let's say, 50 songs, and that's all he listens to on repeat. Man could be driving 7 hours to somewhere. He will listen to those 50 songs out of shuffle, but just it will just be just those 50 songs. Nothing new. Maybe unless you introduce something new, that's it. It's just
Right.
that is it.
Yeah. I will tell you, I can't do that. I don't know. It's a personal pet peeve of mine. I just refuse to do it. I mean, I'll listen to songs that I used to listen to, but it is once every 8 months, I have a day where I'm like, ooh, this is nostalgic, and that's kind of neat.
Well,
Other
yeah,
than that, dude, I'm done with music. I will listen to a few songs for a month or two, and then hopefully it's recycled and I can move on to the next one in the next month.
I have the same way with both music and well, with music it's slightly different where I'll have one song and I'll just listen to it repeatedly for 3 days on end, and then we'll be like, I never want to hear this song ever again. And then I'll listen to it down the line in a year or two again. With with movies and TV show, I like
Right.
watching
Yeah, no,
that
that
stuff
I
once and then never. People go, I do not like rewatching movie. When somebody's like, I've watched this movie 30,000 times, I do not understand how people are able to do that.
I will tell you there are two things that I will watch over. That's not true. There are things that I will rewatch.
My
Yeah,
roommate,
yeah, yeah, it's just on in the
man will,
background.
yeah, man will watch something and then we'll go back to season one and just start rewatching the whole thing again. And I'm like,
Mhm.
I found that to be sick. I was like, that should be classified as some kind of mental disorder. But
Right.
what do I know?
It's just kind of how it goes. And so those sorts of those gaps, right? Those going back to being on topic, my bad. The performance and those gradual shifts have actual costs. We tend to think of them as existential. They're like, oh, they're just having an existential crisis. No, they're not. That's horseshit. They are functioning pieces of how your psyche comes to be. There's nothing existential about that. That is the definition of a crisis. If all you know is work, 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 work. I I have known people, okay, and I'm not knocking them because some of them have been excellent human beings. But the second that they go outside of work, they're entirely different people.
Yeah,
Entirely. Because work is their entire identity. That is a very serious problem. They can't make that distinction between the two. The performance aspect goes away immediately because the cognitive resources aren't there. If you don't have the cognitive resources to keep performing outside, then it makes no difference. Your identity just shuts down outside of those specific places. And it's really interesting too because outside of there, if they leave work and whether you're at home, whether you're at a social function, they can still talk about work.
yeah,
But other than other than work, you can forget it. I'll never forget, man. I used to know this guy a long time ago. Could only talk about two things: work and politics, because that was directly related to the only two things that they did regularly. That was paid attention to politics and worked constantly. And that's okay. That's okay, whatever. If that's what if they were okay with that, why is it not okay?
yeah.
I guess I should put it that way because I don't want to ever make a judgment that it's not okay.
Well, yeah, that's
I,
not okay. If that is truly you, and that is, yeah, because you do not want to assume that they're unhappy or that those choices
Mhm.
are bad, are inherently bad. Because you can, if that is what you desire and what truly you want, then that is fine.
yes, it costs us relationships. There's relational costs in there that are going to suffer. It costs us cognitive resources, but if that is truly who it is that we want to be, then it's not going to matter. We're not going to struggle with mental health problems. Why? Because we're okay with that. We set this pedestal up on self actualization and self realization, and you're like, go, everybody should be self actualized. Well, why? But I'm not saying that it's a bad goal, but 95% of us are not going to achieve self-realization in this lifetime, which is okay, that's fine. I'm going to also venture out to say that 95% of us don't want to achieve self-actualization in this lifetime.
I
Is
mean,
is that a problem? No, why would it be? If it's not causing a detriment on you, if it's not causing a detriment to society, why would that be a problem?
I see that. I
If
see.
if if you genuinely want to be self-actualized and you're not achieving that, that becomes a problem. We start seeing discrepancies in identity. If you genuinely, I'm going to come back to my previous example from last week or the week before, if you genuinely want to be a couch surfing hobo, you can go be a couch surfing hobo, provided that's not causing a detriment to you or to society. It doesn't matter. Those are two very opposite and extreme examples, but there's tons that exist in between.
No, it goes.
If you want to
That,
become a doctor, but you don't actually want to be a doctor, that's a problem.
yeah,
But
that's what
if you want to be a doctor, cool,
I was gonna
great.
say. This goes back to the point we had this of. I don't know if it was you or I that asked the question of knowing everything or ignorance is bliss, and we were going back and forth of you choosing being ignorant is bliss because if you don't know anything, what is there to have a
Yes.
problem about? And going back to the point, that's why there is a good bit of people who become doctor and maybe not necessarily through a combination of things because it's not that the system that the healthcare system is perfect that are then leaving the work field. It's not necessarily due to that, and it's not due to that them not wanting to be a doctor. That is the result, but it is a combination of things that can lead to that.
Mhm,
There probably is a small percentage of people who became doctors just because that was an
mhm.
expectation rather than something that they truly desired, and then they have left the
Yes.
field.
Yeah, and I that happens in every single field imaginable. It's not just for doctors, it's not just for founders, it's not just for research level work. It's across the board. It, I want some people want to go into teaching, then they decide no, I didn't want that. That was not the right thing. A lot of the times we make these decisions without knowing what it's going to cost us in the first place.
Mhm.
I'm not knocking that. A lot of the times it's impossible to know what the cost is that something is going to demand of you. When you think about how many companies and startups survive the first few years and how many people actually make it as founders, that number is abysmally low. It's not because they were unsuccessful. It's not because they didn't know what they were doing. Most of the time, and we hear this all the time, it's because people quit. Well, why do they quit? Because the costs associated with what is going on just become too high. They didn't
Yeah.
want that. They didn't want to sign up for that. That's okay. That's a thing. There's nothing wrong with admitting this cost is too high. This wasn't what I was looking for.
And going back to the whole thing, maybe their identity, there's always the identity has shift, and they're like, maybe they have a family, and they're like,
Mhm.
sacrificing my family, time, money, or whatever it is that in order to put it is not maybe not efficient in order for this thing to continue. So I will have to give this up in order to achieve something else, in order to keep it going.
Yes. And I think that really kind of takes us into this next idea super perfectly. We don't always notice this stuff through reflection. I'm going to come back to the previous example that I've used, the LGBTQ community. They did not, it wasn't like they were like, oh, I know that I'm different. Let me sit and reflect on that. That's not what happened. They experienced so much fucking pain and friction that they were
Mhm.
like, I have to address this now. We don't mention identity until it becomes a crisis. Most of the time, we're like, oh, they're just having an identity crisis. Identity crisis is a more common term used in sentences. I would venture out to say, I don't know this for a fact, but at least in my circles, identity crisis is a lot more common than the term identity.
Yeah.
That's
Because well, people, because the same people go identity crisis. What is the identity that you had to begin with, and because you needed to have something in order to have a crisis. If you never knew what was going on, it's not.
Mhm.
It's just a crisis. It's not necessarily an identity crisis.
Which also the other big major issue with having that specific terminology treats it as a failure. Oh my God,
Hmm.
I'm in crisis. I must have failed at something. I must have done something wrong. But maybe not. It's not to say that you did something wrong. It's just the feedback that you are getting from your environment. I went out and I tried to do X. I don't know. What is that? What did I try to do? I tried to go out and become a politician. Okay.
Punch
We'll just
emoji.
go there. I realized that I hate playing fake nice in the sandbox. That's not a failure. It's not a failure. It doesn't mean that I failed as a politician. It just means that I got the information and said, "Ooh, I don't like that aspect. I'm not. I'm gonna take specific things from there, and that's okay. And then I'm gonna go over here and go do it that way." I'm reading. I told you I was reading Bill Gurley's new book, Running Down a Dream, and one of the stories that he used. I'm going to butcher this entirely. It was one of the. He was a guy who he ended up as coaching. I believe it was football or no, they were athletic or I don't fucking know. I don't remember the exact story, the exact details. But the premise is that went to school, thought he was going to do one thing, and then was like, well, maybe this isn't necessarily the right thing for me. Went and got a job doing work in an athletic department. Was like, wow, I really like doing this. Let me go back and do X. And went and did X, but realized that the accounting was just far beyond his capabilities. And then went ahead and did this over here because it was a little bit, it was still aligned in the same area, but it didn't require that heavy accounting that
Hmm.
was going to be mandatory. Again, at no point in time was there any failure. It was just information. I don't like doing this, so let me go try this. I really like doing this. Let me go back and try this. This isn't necessarily a good thing. Let me go back and do this.
I mean,
That
happens all the time. I've met a lot of people who've either made career switches or have made not necessarily career switches. For example, I know a few doctors who they just do not like certain procedures, so they just will
mhm,
stop performing them. But if they have to, they can do it. But it's not like they'll be like, you know what, that is not my favorite. The patient will come and be like, "That's what I need," and they'll be like, "That's not my favorite thing." But I know there's other person who will do a great job at it because they just know they're over the course of 30, 40, 50 years they've been practicing. They're just like, I do not like doing that specific thing, but I will present another option for the person that needs it to go do that. And then just kind of stay in their own lane and do what really makes them happy.
mhm. But that that level of operation only comes after you've met with that's a learned
Yep.
behavior.
Yeah.
That behavior is very learned from going and saying, okay, this isn't a failure. This is information that I like, or not information that I like. This is information about the things that I like, about the things that I enjoy. So let me figure out how to rework it over here. That is something that is learned through experience, through doing, through what a lot of people will get stopped by and view as failures. This didn't work out, so I must be a failure, or I failed at this. We talked about this for almost first season. Uh, this is just a part of learning. This isn't fail. No, the only, I hate to say that this is one of the most cliche things I will ever hear. The only failure is literally when you stop, because that's the only way that you stop learning. If you stop learning, you have failed. If
Mhm.
you stop receiving that information, moving towards where you want to get to, then failure is already there. And it it is what it is. We're not out here to judge. We're not out here to knock people. That's not the thing. This is just the way that things tend to operate. We tend to see, or this is what we tend to observe out there. And so, what has the field that you exist inside of be reinforcing? And if you think about it that way, rather than this moment of failure, what is it that is being reinforced inside of me? Is it something that I like? Is it something that I dislike? And then, am I deliberately making the choice to do that or not? Sometimes we don't pay attention to that information and we just keep going, or we fail. We fail. We stop. However, if we reframe that as what is being reinforced inside of me and where is it that I can choose differently if I'm getting conflicting signals, we are infinitely more likely to move beyond into
Yeah.
what you were talking about. And so I guess we really should talk about what it means to deliberately actually design that identity. Oh,
How do we transition into doing what we said? What does identity design actually look like? And it's not easy, but it's well, would you say it's hard? That's where I'm trying to find
to design hmm hmm hmm
because it's
that's like
because
asking if life is hard.
that's exactly. I was like going back to the point we said earlier. We really don't identify. We're not really able to tell in the moment until we've had more information. We've even shifted. Then you can go back and really reflect. So how do you do it in the moment?
So that's let's put it to you this way. It's complex, no matter which way we want to spin this, because to some extent you have to be aware of it, and to some extent you have to be um, experiencing it at the same. If you're not aware of it, okay, then you have to be experiencing it. Again, you have to be experiencing that friction, or you have to come through awareness. Those are really our only two avenues to get at identity, correct?
Mhm.
So if you are experiencing that friction, I want to say I'm sorry, but at the same time, not, because it's a good place. If you're experiencing that friction, that means that you're closer to doing something about it than the person who's just going to ignore it. If
Mhm.
you get there through awareness, that's awesome. You don't have to deal with the pain and suffering that comes along with identity crisis and identity collapse. It's super ugly and not a whole lot of fun. We have to understand that we're not becoming a new person. We are simply taking actions towards the idealized version of what we want to become.
Yeah.
That's not, again, not self actualized. It's just, what is it that we so desire at a much deeper level that allows us to operate at our highest level of functioning? And highest level of functioning can mean a lot of different things, but typically it allows you to operate with a smile. It allows you to operate in a way that doesn't, not that's frictionless, but that is internally frictionless. So I go and I take a couple of actions and there's no internal frictions. There's just like, dude, this is so much fun. This is easy. I'm cool with this. It's where we get that quote, work a job that you love and you never have to work again. It's not that they're not working. They're doing what it is that they want to be doing. And so that's how we get there, is through that awareness or through that crisis. So that's the background for how we design. How we design is what we've already actually mentioned. It is taking that action and using the information that we get back from that action. What is that field regurgitating back to us, and which part of it do we appreciate? Which part of it do we not appreciate? Which ones are we going to hold on to and keep and make a part of our identity? And which ones are we going to go ahead and say, no, no, thanks. I don't want that anymore.
Mhm.
It's about setting constraints. We've talked about this as well. It's about protecting our boundaries. This is how we go ahead and we intentionally shape our identity. And it sounds easy. It is not always that easy, because we have relational pressures. We have people on the outside going, well, why would you want to do that? I always come back to the answer or the conversation I had with my great uncle. He asked me one day over the summer what I wanted to do. And I was just like, well, at the moment, I just want to play music. And it looked me dead in the eye and was just like, well, why the hell would you want to do that? You're not one of those people that's naturally talented at music. Thanks, bruh. Those are very real pressures. They make it infinitely more difficult.
They do.
However, this is going to be twofold. This is going to help us tenfold, because it's going to increase our confidence. It is going to increase our connection with our internal and external functioning. We were talking about pulvinar nucleus today and how meditation increases its efficiency, not because it is working less, but because everything is coherent. And that is what we are looking for. We are looking for that coherent interaction between external and internal. If external and internal are operating coherently, our mental state is infinitely better. If it is at war, if there is friction, if there are things going on that we don't accept, that we don't appreciate, it's always going to get worse. I don't like the reflection question that I have up there, so I'm going to completely turn it around. Who are you currently? Think about that. Sit back and look at what does my identity currently say about me?
I mean,
Is
it's a
that the
loaded.
identity that I was looking for, and is that what I was striving?
I was gonna say that's a loaded question too, because and it's okay if there is like
Oh,
no answer,
yeah.
because we've all been there when somebody goes, "Who are you?" and you go and you start just listing um things that you do and not necessarily things that you are.
Well, it's very complex and
Yeah, obviously
complicated,
the
and
things
it's
that you
very
do.
uncomfortable. It's super uncomfortable, especially if you're not used to thinking along those lines, but it begins to build that awareness. So even if you don't come up with a good answer, that's okay. Even if you don't have a strong answer for it, use that. That's all information. Every single time we ask ourselves one of these reflection questions, it comes back to us because it starts to begin to build that awareness. And awareness is the first precursor to beginning to actually make any sort of meaningful change you want to make. Not that I want anybody to make, not that Carlos wants anybody to make, not that any influencer wants any. The goal is, what do you want out of this?
That's where we'll leave it for today.
You don't need to do anything with it right now.
Each episode this season will end with a question worth carrying.
Not an answer, just a place to look.
If this is your first time here, you're welcome to follow the show. New episodes drop weekly.
And if you want to go deeper, find us at theactive.com.
We'll be back next week.
Until then, notice what you're already designing your field.
And whether that's by choice.